Hey guys, what's going on? Sincere here with whoissincere.com and the All Rights Matter show. Listen, I just want to do a quick, very quick video here, on something that affects all of us. It definitely has affected the African American population, but it also affects all of us as humans. For those of us that believe in equality, for those of us that believe in humanitarian efforts, for those of us who are placing our lives on the line to discuss the things that you won't learn in pretty much in any part of the American education system, this report is special for that reason. I want to show you an article that I found, and I found it to be quite intriguing. I'm going to leave a link for this article below for any of you who are interested in reading the full article. But let's read the title of the article, and I'll just discuss a couple key factors. The African Holocaust: 1,200 years of Arab slavery, 500 years of European American slavery, 100 million plus dead. The greatest crime in history, the single greatest crime in history. Now, this is very little discussed, and it's very inconvenient to American culture to discuss how many people have really been killed, how many African American people have been killed at the hands of slavery and hatred. Now, a lot of you would say, well, those aren't the facts. The facts are really, just 10 million people or 15 million people were killed during slavery. And, and when you say just before naming a number and then millions, that right there in itself should be a crime. We're talking about millions of people being wiped off of the face of the planet because of hatred, okay? Because of pure hatred. So I have a lot of white people that, respond on my channel, and some good comments, some, absolutely atrocious, terrible comments. And it's very saddening. It's very saddening, especially for someone that's given his all for this country, to read some of these comments and to read where we are in 2016 in America as far as how we look at the African American. And I believe that this right here is something that, not a lot of people want to talk about, but it's something that is factual. Let's be real about it. Africans were not just enslaved by white people. Africans were enslaved by Africans, they were enslaved by Arabs, and they were enslaved by European people, okay? Which would be European American white people today. Now, what is not talked about is the total effect that has had on African Americans, as a whole, whether it be in Africa or whether it be in America. And I believe this article actually did a great job of pointing out some key things that we could actually take away from this to understand how this cycle is still perpetuated through today's society, and how we can probably bring an end to it just by the education alone of what is happening to Africans in America and abroad. So one key thing that stuck out to me was, if you go to the population statistics and you look at, the amount of people that were alive and the amount of people that were being born during that time frame, there's some blaringly obvious things that stick out that should be of concern to anybody that believes in humanitarian efforts, believes in equality. Again, things that are, very substantial for understanding where we're going in America and why there's such a divide in this country. If we look at the continent of Africa between 1650 in 1950, we see only 100 million extra people being born into that country, okay, into that continent. Now, from 1650 to 1950, that's only 300 years. And for 300 years, for only 100 million people to be born would, definitely show a very slow rate of growth. But if we notice in 1750 and 1850, 100 years and 200 years out, there was a loss, and then there was an evening off of the actual population. So from 100 million to 95 million is a 5 million person loss. Okay? From 1750 to 1850, for it to be 95 million to 95 million, that shows a skewing of the numbers. That would mean that not a single person was born and not a single person died. Okay? Now, we know that that's very untrue. Over the course of 100 years, it's possible that more than 100 million could have been born. Okay? Now, what makes that possible? Let's go to Europe. From 1650 to 1950, we notice that 100 million people, in 1650, which is relatively equal in comparison to the statistics of Africa, were born. To 1950, we have 530 million people of European descent, which means that the population grew by almost 5.5 times as much than 1650. And if we look statistically between 1750 to 1850, we see that there was almost a doubling of the European, society, whereas the African society stayed relatively the same, from 95 million to 95 million. So, what happened to those 100 and something million people that would have been born in Africa? That's the question that we should be asking. And as we go from 1850 to 1950 in Africa, we can see that there was only a relatively low increase of about 100 million people. Whereas we look at Europe and we can see that, again, there was almost a doubling of, of the amount of people that were alive in Europe at that time. So from 265 million people to 530 million people. Now, let's be very clear, guys. This is by no accident. No accident whatsoever. Who has been complicit in the deaths of all of these African Americans, or all of these Africans, because not all of them died in America? And that's a discussion that most people aren't willing to have. And they're not willing to have because the statistics behind it show. They show and they prove that there has been a generations-long genocide of the African culture. Now, with that being said, there's a problem. There's a very notable problem that can easily be proved by statistics, but no one wants to deal with those statistics. And I think the reason is quite evident, on why they don't want to deal with those statistics. Dealing with those statistics would mean that this is the largest genocide over a period of, hundreds of years in history that has ever happened to mankind. Yes, I said that. The largest genocide ever over a period of years that has happened to mankind. Now, note that this only goes up to 1950. We're approaching 2020 here very soon, and I'm sure that those numbers are drastically different. Okay? So, what does that tell us? That tells us that there has been a plan that has been hatched against the darkest man here on this planet. As I look around and I see, just mainstream television and, shows that come out and, all this kind of stuff, I noticed that there are no people in broadcasting positions and news positions that look like me. I'm a 6'5", dark-skinned black man with a beard. If you can point out 10 newscasters out of the thousands, tens of thousands of newscasters that are out there delivering your news to you every day, if you can point out just 10 that are prominent African Americans with dark skin, tall, and a beard, I'll give you kudos to that. But I've looked and I can't find anyone who is quote unquote relevant in mainstream media that looks like me. We have been literally segregated and pushed to the side all throughout history. Now, that has not been just at the hands of white people. It's been at the hands of Arab people. It's been at the hands of white people. It's been at the hands of also Africans. Okay? Now, where have we suffered our greatest losses? Our greatest losses, of course, have come from the transatlantic slave trade, where slaves were bought from Africa, brought to the United States, and many times during their travels, many of them, millions of them died on the way actually to America. Okay? And they were bought and stored, underneath the deck of the boat, chained together as if they were just general items that you would ship, normal packages that you would ship. And they were later, distributed and sold even through the New York Stock Exchange. You can look back through that, for top dollar, for highest bidder. This is what the history of this globe has been. This is what the history of this country has been. So for us to continue to ignore the systemic racism and hatred that has happened to the African man, and to duly ignore the effects, listen closely, to ignore the effects of that hatred, of that racism, it's appalling. It's appalling. So we get a lot of people out here today that say, well, African Americans have welfare. We're on government-assisted programs that either barely meet the lowest living wage possible, or they don't meet that wage at all, and therefore people are just systemically stuck in poverty. Now, what does poverty breed? Poverty itself actually breeds crime. A conflict also with self-identity. So, for many years, the African has not been able to recover, especially from the 1950s and 60s, where there was a great uprising of the African population in America, where they said, we're not going to stand for this anymore. A couple leaders were appointed, such as Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, you name it. There's several leaders that were appointed, by the African community to places of prominence and power that would lead them to the place, their rightful place amongst their fellow brothers and sisters of this planet. But we see that hatred once again took those individuals from us, at an early age and at early times. So we have never reached a place of prominence and a place of reconciliation in this country that has been notable for the African, whereas reparations have been given to all different kinds of ethnicities, whether we're talking about the Holocaust or we're talking about, we'll even go, bring it home here to America, to the Indians. Okay? So, with that being said, I believe there's a huge problem that needs to be addressed it needs to be addressed not just on a level of, American politics and economics, but on a global scale. I believe it was earlier this year. It could have been last year as well. The the United Nations, actually came out with a proclamation towards America stating, "Why aren't you paying Africans reparations?" Now, a lot of people may not agree with reparations. I do. The reason why I agree with reparations is because as I listen to Donald Trump talk about make America great again, I think about how America was made great. America was not made great off of peaceful ingenuity that involved everyone. Let me repeat that. America was not made great off of peaceful ingenuity that involved everyone. America was made great through the castration, rape, dominance, and murdering of the African American, which was considered a lower than human species level by our own laws here in America. If the African constitutes as 3/5 of a human and is not entitled to full rights as their fellow brothers and sisters who we can now eat beside and actually have inventions and ideas and grow communities, if we're not counted as equals at that table, then how will we ever be able to address what's happened to us in an equal way, in a fair way, in a way where people could say, hey, you know what? It is really messed up what happened to those individuals. It is really screwed up how if I go to look at my family tree, I can only go as far back as my slave captors, which were from Normandy. That's how far I can go back into my past. I can't tell you where I came from in Africa. I can't tell you the lineage of my history in Africa. I can only tell you who owned my family here in America. Okay? Therefore, that's the reason for my last name, is my last name bears the name of the slave owners who owned my family, still to this day. So this is a reality that other cultures don't have to deal with on a mass level. But here in America, we have to deal with this. And we're told that if we speak out against this, that we're the racists, that we have not gotten over it, and that we continue to perpetuate the system of crisis that was lifted off of us. Well, I'm here to tell you that that system was never lifted off of us. It only morphed into something else. So as we go back up and we look at these numbers, what they don't indicate is a period in time, in which I'll cover it later, and I've covered it in other videos, but I'll go more in depth later. A period in time from the 1950s until now, where there's become a very popular philosophy in the United States that a lot of white people who believe in supremacy, what they actually practice. They practice a system called eugenics. That's EUGENICS, for those of you who want to look it up. Okay? Eugenics in America has done more harm to the globe than any one system that has ever been implemented, including what happened to the people, unfortunately what happened during the Holocaust. And people will ask the question, well, why do you say that, and how can you prove that? Well, there's one easy way to actually prove it. One of the easy ways that you can prove it is to get yourself educated on what happened to those scientists and those people that killed millions from the Nazi regime. What happened to those people? Were those people ever tried for their war crimes and put to death? Or either in prison for a certain amount of time? And the answer to that is broadly no. The scientists, under the direction of Adolf Hitler and other people under the direction of Adolf Hitler, were actually given immunity. They were actually brought to the United States, where they later obtained jobs all throughout different layers and levels of society, mainly working for the government in very high branches of the government, and not only high branches of the government, also organizations like NGOs that work directly with the government. One of the most prominent people of that movement was Margaret Sanger, when she formed the Urban Birth Control League. Now, this was a very widely unpopular, organization for those who were of color. Of course, because it depicted Africans as apes, as less than, as quote unquote unfit. Now, out of that, practices such as sterilization in America were actually performed, and sterilization of the African man and woman in America did not stop until the 1970s. Look it up, guys. Look it up. There's still a person who was sterilized in the 1970s that's living, and she spoke, very candidly about her experience of being sterilized when she went to go apply for assistance, for benefits to help her family get through hard times, because it was hard times. Now, this woman, I believe one of her children, she already did have children, but one of her children, I believe it was her son, grew up to become he had a very prominent figure, a profile. He ended up being pretty much a wealthy person, and takes great care of his mother to this day. With that being said, I find it, quite interesting that the same people that we were sterilizing, some of their children have grown up to be entrepreneurs, movers and shakers of this world, and have proven to be extremely fit. Now, how many more people were circumvented from being born out of hateful policies derived from eugenic thinking and practices that could have helped this world? So, as we continue to murder the unborn, as we continue to let Margaret Sanger's Urban Birth Control League, which surprisingly morphed into something that we today call Planned Parenthood, as we continue to allow these things to enter our neighborhoods, and for Planned Parenthood clinics, 85 to 90% of them are actually placed around low-income neighborhoods that house African Americans. As we continue to allow that happen, the genocide continues to happen. What was very interesting about, not just learning these statistics that you've seen here on the screen this whole time, but what's very interesting in learning about eugenics, I'm going to be honest with you. It's the fact that their ideology and their philosophy derives out of, we don't want to seem like we're killing people. Instead, we will create devices and mechanisms on a social and economic level and beyond that will seem like those people are killing themselves, even though we have provided the fuel and the flame for the fire. Okay? That is called setting a snare for people. And multiple snares have been set for the African American community. And that's why I wanted to kind of talk to you about this a little bit. This isn't a video that's just going to talk to you about the over 1,000 Americans that are killed at the hands of police every year. This video is detailing the millions that die from practices that are stemmed out of bigotry and hatred for the darker man in the United States of America and abroad. So I would challenge you to look for this information, to research this information, to find out what the true facts are of this information. Specific facts, such as population statistics. So what you see here has been bred into our society. What you see here is hatred run amok. What you see here is a group of people who have had to deal with literally post-traumatic stress syndrome and post-traumatic stress disorder due to the fact that their trauma has never been reconciled. Our trauma as African Americans in this country still continues, and it still continues with the face of what it had 50 years ago, and that's the face of denial. That denial has allowed America and the globe to view the African American as a subhuman, as less than, as people who are not fit to be a part of any society, and people who are dangerous people that should be, looked at as if they shouldn't exist, or you shouldn't want them in your communities. That is simply not true. I would urge you to research Dr. Shirley Jackson. I would urge you to research the contributions of Dr. Thomas Mensah, prominent African American figures who have helped to reshape this entire globe through their contributions to society. African Americans are your friends. African Americans are not your enemies. But yet we see a hatred for this populace of people that is unfounded, unwarranted, ungodly, unethical, and unbecoming of a nation who proclaims to be a great nation. I find it hard to explain to my half African American, half Latino daughter, that, why she is seeing the things that she sees on television regarding the deaths of so many African American men, many of them unarmed at the hands of police officers. And I'll be doing a video here soon for children. A video for children so that they can understand the effects of racism, hatred, and bigotry, and the roots of it, and how to avoid that, and how to build a better society. And that idea came out of my daughter asking me one day after she sat in, I believe it was the hair salon with her mother, and she saw something on the TV that was on that stated, how many black unarmed men were killed here in the United States. It disturbed her, and my daughter is 7. So she called me and she asked me, "Daddy, why are they killing black men? Are you going to be okay?" And that question hurt me. It hurt me a lot, and it still hurts me right now. I never imagined a day where my daughter would ask me that question. And my daughter would be aware of the fact that African lives are valued less than any other life. And I ask you to excuse me because it still bothers me. But that's all I want to talk about for this video. You know, is we have to do better. I can go on for hours talking about the research and information that I've accumulated over the years. My many years of studying what's going on in America and abroad. And I could give you all of that information within a few hours video, but I know you don't have the time. So a lot of my videos are an hour, so a half an hour to me is short. But I pray that you'll look at this information and you'll see that there's a genocide going on. A genocide of my brothers and sisters that is happening, and it's not just isolated to America, it's actually global. But America is the only country that has the power to change that. We are the most economically dominant country, and we have built that off of the backs of brown and black women who have sacrificed their lives. They've literally lost their daughters. They've lost their wives to rape and murder, all off of economic greed and perversions. I mean, what more can a people bear and still be called trash and less than, not significant, and deserving of those type of crimes? I implore you to do your research and to find out why Black America is in such a disarray, why Black America can't seem to get 1 foot up above. And the systems that are still in place, whether it's eugenics or just, you know, a different faction of white supremacy that exists, I implore you to study those systems and to find out how you can fix them and what you can do today to fix them. Again, this has to stop. And the miseducation of what is happening is only leading to this happening more and more and more, and for it to be swept under the rug, for history to be whitewashed, and for generations of African Americans that extend beyond myself to fall into a category of ignorance, disarray, and a backward cycle of, again, eugenic sterilization and pure genocide. This is knocking at our door right now. And if America does not wake up, then this will turn into not just a violent civil war in this country, but a violent civil war globally. And I can't help but to think that the forces that be are stoking this fire. They're fanning the flames of frustration. They're fanning the flames of hatred. And they are hoping for something epic to come out of it so that they can again twist the story, rewrite history, and demonize those who have contributed and given so much. I thank you for your time. I thank you for watching this video. I hope that I was able to explain some of our perils and problems here in America and abroad as African Americans. And I hope that this video will lead you to share this with your family and friends. Feel free to like it, because I'm sure the people that hate me and hate the truth, hate the very thing that I am, a black man, will dislike this video and discount and discredit everything that I've said. So I ask that you who are listening, who believe in this message and who understand the facts and the statistics surrounding this message, that you please subscribe to my channel. Please like my videos once you actually listen to them and listen to the message that I'm giving, and share them and let people know all is not lost. We have plenty of hope. Plenty of hope. If there's any one set of humans on this planet who have experienced the most genocide that have hope, it's us. So I thank you again for your time. I thank you again for subscribing, for liking, for sharing. I thank you for the positive comments. And I just ask that you follow me on this journey and that you too become a leader of this journey, and I'll follow you as well. Thank you. Stay alert, stay alive.